Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. Today we're taking one more look at those Vikings that I've been talking about for 2 weeks now. I hope you've been tracking with me, or this isn't going to make as much sense as I want it to. But we've been seeing how rowing their own boats really benefited these guys. Not only did it give them just good physical exercise and made them strong when they went into battle, but it had taught them how to work together so that when they were in that battle, they were a solid team. And that's just two elements of what turned these guys into just an unstoppable force to be reckoned with. There's one surprising ingredient that you might not expect to find among a bunch of Vikings that was absolutely essential to make this work, and that's humility. By all accounts, they were proud warriors, but they didn't assume that that meant someone else should have to row their boats for them. Whether or not they knew anything about the beneficial side effects of rowing, they knew that rowing the boat right up to the battle and then quite often rowing away in a hurry were essential parts of this mission, and they took personal responsibility for it. It's one of the most unique things about Vikings because everyone from pirates to the Roman legion separated the rowers from the fighters, which on one hand makes a lot of sense. I mean, you want your fighters to arrive fresh and not already worn out from rowing, but there's definitely also a pride element to it. People celebrate the warriors for the victory. No one ever celebrates the person who rowed the boat, even though that was just as essential. Vikings were no different in that aspect. They also viewed the battle as more glorious than the rowing, but they did both, and they wound up better prepared for the battle as a result of it. The idea of humbling yourself to perform the menial task occurs throughout Scripture. But what we don't notice as much is how often that sets you up for better things down the road. It's been said that before God can do a great work through you, he has to do a great work in you. Like Joseph was basically an administrative assistant in both Potiphar's house and in the prison, but that turned out to be his training for becoming second in command over all of Egypt. Moses spent 40 years shepherding his father-in-law's sheep out in the wilderness. You don't have to be much of a Bible scholar to see how that prepared him to spend the next 40 years leading the nation of Israel through the same wilderness. In every case, what started out as this non-glamorous, pretty thankless job turns out to be laying the groundwork for something much greater that God had in store down the road. Probably the most famous example is David. Starts out as a shepherd boy, goes on to become the mighty warrior, defeats Goliath, becomes the king of the nation. Early in that story, when he's stepping up saying that he can go ahead and fight this giant, and King Saul is saying, "Who are you kidding? You're just a kid." Look at David's response in 1 Samuel 17:34. David says to him, "Your Majesty, I take care of my father's sheep. And when one of them is dragged off by a lion or a bear, I go after it and beat the wild animal until it lets the sheep go. If the wild animal turns and attacks me, I grab it by the throat and kill it." Now, I think we can all agree that's pretty hardcore, and David totally deserves to be in the same conversation with Vikings. The thing we miss is that David has 7 older brothers who none of them have this resume of fighting wild animals. That didn't happen because David was the animal fighter. It happened because David was the shepherd, which was such a lowly job that the rest of his brothers thought that they were too good to do it. Just a few verses earlier, in verse 28, his oldest brother was actually making fun of him for it and said, "What are you doing here anyway? Who's taking care of your little flock of sheep out in the desert?" That lowly, seemingly pathetic job of being a shepherd was actually what prepared David to come in and fight this giant. Sometimes rowing a boat builds a warrior. Sometimes tending sheep develops a leader. Don't underestimate what God might be preparing you for with your current duties, no matter how tedious they might seem. Jesus taught this same idea in a couple different parables. Matthew 25 has what we call the parable of the talents. At the end of that, when the servant reports how things went in the master's absence, at verse 21, his master said to him, "Well done, you good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter the joy of your master." In Luke 16, Jesus tells another parable that he wraps up with this message. Anyone who can be trusted in little matters can also be trusted in important matters. But anyone who is dishonest in little matters will be dishonest in important matters. At the end of the day, it's our willingness to do the small things well that prepares us for the big things that we wish we could do. It worked for the Vikings, and it'll work for us too. I bet you never thought a pack of marauding Vikings could have so much to teach us, did you? Well, there's one last thing I want to leave you with. I don't know about you, but I can't have a conversation about Vikings without picturing something that looks like this. Maybe this. But the truth is, there's absolutely no evidence that Vikings ever wore helmets with horns on them. Just in case this disrupts everything you know of Vikings, I did a little bit of research on it, so let me try to fill you in. Horned helmets actually predate the Vikings by a few hundred years, but they were like a ceremonial headdress. No one ever wore them into battle, which makes a lot of sense because while it might look kind of intimidating, it has no tactical advantage and a lot of disadvantages. I mean, if you're in the woods, it's going to get tangled suspended on branches and stuff, if you're in close combat, your opponent can grab a hold of it and jerk your head around. There's no benefit to a horned helmet. The image of Vikings wearing horned helmets shows up in like one painting and a tapestry that are a few hundred years after Vikings have basically faded away into history. And then a while after that, there was this opera where I guess the costume designer had seen either that painting or tapestry, because he gave the Viking characters horned helmets, and voila, an enduring stereotype is born. What I can't get over is how this universal image of Vikings with horned helmets, even this guy's got them, traces back to one artistic interpretation. That really brings me back to what Punk Rock Theologian is all about. Don't just accept the story and the image you've been handed. Your concept of God is infinitely more important than your mental image of Viking warriors. Be sure it's accurate and not just based on some paintings or songs or something. Read the Bible for yourself so you know what it really says. Letting God speak to you personally is the best way to know what He wants for you personally.